Happy Friday. Happy Fridays with Fidelman. I'm Cheryl Fidelman, life coach, trauma healer, and writer. And this is Labor Day weekend, August 2019, and today's topic for Fridays with Fidelman is trauma and memory. And I'm calling it trauma and memory as opposed to traumatic memory because I want to make distinctions between traumatic memory and memory itself. And the reason why I started thinking about this and the reason why I wanted to bring this up on Fridays with Fidelman is because I was talking to a doctor yesterday, Dr. Rocky, who lives in Florida, and he's a really brilliant, sweet man, and he works with autoimmune disease and how unhealed childhood trauma can cause or impact autoimmune disease in an adult. And he asked me if I deal with false memory. And I've had one or two people ask me that before and bring up the topic of false memory. Now, for one thing, it doesn't weigh heavily as important in my work because I believe every single thing that my clients tell me. I'm not searching for lies, falsities, and inaccuracies. I also tend to think that no memory is 100% accurate to what happened. I think it's almost impossible because we remember through filters of time. We remember through how the happening made us feel and what our cognitive world and what our somatic world both made it mean, which could be completely different things. So we add meaning to events. And so my work is really focused on how are you remembering it? What are you remembering? What are you feeling about that memory? What are you making it mean? And how are those feelings and meanings impacting your current life and your current relationships and really the current context of your life? Now, that's not to say that I think things didn't actually happen. Like, it's not like the abuse didn't happen or the molestation didn't happen or the divorce or the bullying just didn't happen. But there are layers of it that we oftentimes, unbeknownst to us, there are layers that we add on to it. And for example, I was wondering why it wasn't that bright. For example, self-worth is a really big thing. When it comes to trauma, our system marginalizes us and says we are not worthy because this thing happened to me, because this person abused me, because this person set me aside, because this person didn't love me or this person didn't pay attention to me. Therefore, I'm unworthy of love or attention or validation. And so those are meanings, logical reactions, but meanings that we add onto memories that compound the trauma of the memory. Because 9 times out of 10, it's possible that that person wasn't caring for you, but that doesn't mean that they didn't care for you because you were unworthy. It's because they didn't have the ability in that moment to care for anything or anybody except for themselves and their own experience. But we absorb that as if it actually has something to do with us. And so that's just an example of how many layers we add to our experience. And also the way in which our somatic system, which is our body, our nervous system, the way in which our cell memory absorbs memories. Some of my clients really don't remember the specific happenings, but they remember how it made them feel. And they know that they still have that feeling now as an adult, and that feeling is wrecking their lives on some level, running their lives on some level. It's really sucking away their potential because they feel tight in their body or they feel muted in their body or they feel scared in certain situations. And so they can feel how that trauma has impacted their system. And I would say that that is traumatic memory. the memory that is set in your body, the memory that is set in your cells, that is traumatic memory. And then the memory of the trauma is the memory of what actually happened, which gets distorted over time. For example, and I think that part of the distortion, we distort it in order to validate our story about ourselves. That is also, I think, a big part of the distortion. For example, when my parents got divorced, it was the big explosive night of my life. You know, my mom was crying and she was flailing on the bed, and my dad was packing his army bag, and I was watching the break happen right in front of my eyes in my parents' bedroom, and I was 6. And I remember I was saying some things. I was trying to get it to stop. I was kind of begging and pleading, and then I had asked my dad, promise me you'll come back, and I remember him looking at me, and I remember him saying, I promise I'll come back. I mean, I remember he looked at me right in my eyes he had these big crystal blue eyes. And so I don't remember my brother being there. My brother is 6 years older than me, and I always had this story that my brother is 6 years older than me, so whenever it got really heated and intense in the house, my brother could just leave. He can get on his bike and leave, and he didn't really have to get the brunt of a lot of stuff that I did because I couldn't leave because I was so young. This is the story that I had. And so I thought, this is another time that my brother got to leave. He wasn't there when my dad left. And this is just another time where I had to get the sort of I had to witness the most traumatic event in the household, and my brother didn't have to. So I carried this story on top of the memory of the trauma, which is watching my mom cry and watching my dad pack his bags and feeling hopeless and trying to help. And so that's the memory of the trauma. And then the traumatic memory in my body was, I have to take everything because my brother doesn't have to. That was an added on bonus, an added on traumatic piece of the memory for years and years and years and years. And I just found out maybe 5-6 years ago that actually my brother was there. He was in his room and he was like in his own hell listening to the whole event and situation, all the sounds and the crying and the screaming and the begging and all the noises and the closet opening and closing. So it was like he was in like the symphony of sounds locked in his room. And that, when I found that out, that he was there, it cured decades of me thinking that he was like better, he had it better. Decades of me thinking that I just have to take it all. Whatever comes at me, no matter how intense, no matter how unfair, no matter how hellish and awful to be around, it's me that actually has to sit in the tornado of it all. And, everybody else, especially my brother, is like immune to having to deal with all of that. So, again, not to take away from the things that we remembered that we actually really know happened. But I think it's an important part of the healing process to actually separate what are the meanings and interpretations that we had on top of what happened that is adding to the traumatic experience that we're left with. That's adding to how that experience is running our life. And I think the most important part of the meaning and the interpretation is what we make it mean about our self-worth. What we make it mean about our existence and the validation of our existence, and what we also make it mean about other people. Because the more we diminish ourselves and the more we diminish our own existence, the more we become codependent, the more we feel that other people are inferior to us and that they can set us aside and sort of treat us however they want to treat us because we are unworthy, because we were made to feel unworthy by that situation that happened when we were younger, situation or situations. You know, I talk a lot how my mom was a rageaholic, and she would like black out and go into rages for days and days and days. It was like living with the Tasmanian devil. And you know, interpreted that consciously, unconsciously, in my mind, in my body, as if there's actually nothing really sweet or precious or pure about me. And it's like I lost my innocence, because if my mother could do that stuff that she was doing around me, in front of me, then there's actually nothing pure about me or sacred about me. There was nothing precious about me as a little girl to preserve if she could do all of that stuff around me, which is common with people who have been abused emotionally, physically, sexually as children. The things that they had to witness at a very young age were really premature for them to witness, and so they lose their innocence and their kind of like specialness of being a little person, a young person. You know, you have these fresh new eyes on the world, and you're witnessing really the darkness of humanity at such a young age. And so I had a conversation with my mom several years ago. I've had many of these kinds of conversations with my mom, but several years ago, you know, it got to the point where I really started like mustering up the courage to tell my mom the things that she did and the things that I witnessed. And she said, you know, and I would bring up things that I saw, and she would go, I didn't even know you were there. I wasn't even paying attention. I mean, I probably wouldn't have done that if I knew you were right there, or if I actually considered that what I was doing, that you would even care, that you wouldn't just go into your room and watch TV and close the door. Like it didn't even occur to her that I was there, or that I was getting impacted by her moods. And so that, for me, those series of conversations that I had with my mom, it cured a lifetime of how personal I made it. That she consistently went through her own dark night of the soul right in front of me and allowed me to witness it. I started to shed how personal that I made that. So when Dr. Rocky asked me, do you work with false memory, I would go so far as to say that every memory has a bit of falsity. It's falseness, whichever one of those is a word. I think falsity is a word. I think every memory holds some distortion. It holds some interpretation. And the dissecting and noticing of the interpretation, and also giving oneself permission to say, yes, I interpreted it that way. I have a right to interpret it that way. I have a right to take it personally. And like sitting in the ownership of that, because when we are victims, when we're children, a lot of this stuff that a lot of us had to endure and experience at the hand of our guardians, we were victims. And so it's totally valid to feel like it was personal and be angry and hold it as an injustice. And it's an important part of one's healing path, and in my work, their trauma healing path, to start to depersonalize these traumatic memories, and to really distinguish the traumatic memory versus the memory of the trauma. Because the personalization of the event is continually re-traumatizing us. It's continuing the cycle of the trauma, the more we personalize it and make it mean something about us. This thing happens, so I don't trust. This thing happens, so I don't feel safe. This thing happens, so nobody's going to protect me, so I have to protect myself. And those are valid reactions, and mostly unconscious reactions that are set inside people's bodies, that are running the way they move through relationship. But as we start to open up memory and look at where our body has personalized the memory, then we can start to separate, and as I always say, become a sovereign being. And then we can actually replay the memory and say, I was a sovereign being in that moment, and add some sovereignty to yourself as a child. Because it's the enmeshment in that moment that that really has it occur, that raises the victimness, and has that situation occur as a personal act, when a lot of the times, I'm not speaking for 100% of the times, but a lot of the times it's not personal. A lot of the times we happen to be in the space of somebody that wasn't functional and wasn't healthy, and we just happened to be there. Okay, thank you so much for listening and watching and tuning in on Fridays. You guys are awesome. I love the emails that you send me. I love your notes. I love your ideas. I love your suggestions. I love how you share about your life. Just keeping the community conversation going, deepening our connection, and deepening our really the healing of ourselves individually, but also as you share your healing, it heals the team. It heals the quilt of us together as humans. So unless I have another thought after I end here, which I often do, I jump back in. Have a wonderful weekend. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Have fun, and happy healing. Actually, just one little edit. Earlier in the video I said inferior, but I meant superior. I often switch those words around. Okay, have a great weekend, happy healing, and you are awesome.